All right, today on the podcast, we've got David Fivecoat, who is a retired U.S. Army colonel with 4 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, 102 jumps as a paratrooper, and former leader of the U.S. Army Ranger School. You're also a father, blogger, speaker on leadership, executive coach, entrepreneur, and author of the book Grow Your Grit. So, David, welcome to the show.
Dale, thanks for having me. Really excited about talking to you today.
Yeah, definitely. So, tell us a little bit about who you are, what do you do?
Yeah. Like you said, I spent about 24 years in the Army as an infantry officer, all in conventional and airborne assignments. But my culminating assignment was I led the U.S. Army's Ranger School and Airborne School here at Fort Benning, Georgia. In 2017, I made the transition and retired and began doing leadership training with another company. And I decided I wasn't gritty enough. So, on the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, I decided I should start my own company. And so I founded the Fivecoat Consulting Group in March of 2020, and have since grown it over the last 18 months. And we do leadership training, executive coaching, and I'm now the author of a book that came out here in July called Grow Your Grit.
So it's interesting since you went there early. Like, what about you was it like? You said I wasn't gritty enough. What was it like? What do you mean by that?
Well, that was sort of a joke, but
Okay.
the genesis of the book was I was working with a client doing business consulting, and they were thinking about hiring an outside agency to talk to them about how to develop their grit in the organization. And they said, and the person asked me, said, "Hey, would you take a look at this book? Because you're kind of gritty. You've done these combat tours and you've done Ranger School, and you compete in half Ironmans and are a cyclist and all this other stuff. So you seem to have a lot of grit." So I looked at it and I came away with the same problem that I saw with Angela Duckworth's book. Angela Duckworth is sort of the 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 sort of the genesis behind grit and why it's popular. She's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, has written and talked extensively about grit, has a TED Talk. But I came away from her book and this other guy's book, both with the idea that they talk a lot about what grit is, how you measure it, who has it, who doesn't, how it sets you up for success. But neither one really offered a great process for how do you develop grit in yourself. And if you don't have it, what are some ideas and how you create that pathway to get there so you have grit. And grit is nothing more than this idea of being able to persevere and accomplish your long-term goals. And everybody has these long-term goals, whether it's graduate from college or complete a marathon or do stand up a business. They have these long-term goals, but a lot of folks fail at accomplishing them. So how do you develop that process that gets you closer to accomplishing those goals?
Yeah, I thought. I read Angela Duckworth's book a few months back, and I did. I'm with you. I really appreciated the way she defined grit. Like, really brought the data to it. But and there was some dance around to how do you about grit and things like that. So in her book it was the combination of passion and perseverance. So I did like it, especially as a parent, and as a leader. I did appreciate just the in depthness of kind of bringing grit to the surface, as you're kind of saying. Like she's kind of brought it to life. So I did appreciate that in the book. It was a good book. But yeah, so when it comes to and your book, you got some awesome reviews on it. So congrats on that. I thought they
Thanks.
were awesome. Um, so, so you were inspired to write it because you just felt there wasn't someone out there like truly answering the formula of how to build your grit.
Yeah. I thought that wasn't out there. And then the other thing that I sort of disagree with Angela about is this idea that you have to have passion. Because there are a lot of things that you do and I do that are gritty. I walk my dog every day. It doesn't particularly bring me joy and passion, happiness that I do it, but I do it because she likes to get out. I like to get out, and there's it's something that requires some discipline and habit and all these things that we talk about that set folks up for being successful. But it didn't particularly have a whole lot of passion. I don't go out and tell everyone I'm a professional dog walker. I know that some
Yeah.
people maybe get fired up about that, but it doesn't particularly fire me up.
Right. And who'd you write the book for? Were you thinking about a certain avatar or type of
Yeah.
leader?
So the book's in two portions. The first portion is for individuals, and so for folks that wanted to try to develop their grit. And, and personally, I think it's a great thing for either folks that are just starting out, whether they're a teenager or somebody that just graduated from college. How do you think through when you're out in the world and there's lots of choices? How do you develop a system or a framework that helps you accomplish these long range goals? Then the second part is that I also spent some time thinking about and studying is this idea of how do you develop a gritty organization? Because a gritty organization is not just, you don't just take the sum of all the gritty people in it, because you and I have both been in organizations that you know may have had a ton of great leaders but they didn't have any followers, or a ton of folks that are gritty, and then of course there was nobody in there that wanted to follow along or support what everybody else was doing, and so it falls apart. And so a gritty organization is slightly different. So I wrote it for folks that were either leaders of themselves, and how do you develop grit for your personal stuff, or how do you develop it as a leader to develop grit in your organization. um, Part of it was we were in the pandemic. It's a tough time. Folks are struggling, and I thought folks could really be able to use it as a way to develop things so they could accomplish their goals as we work our way through this pandemic.
So, and I think that's great. And I think that it's especially when it comes to leadership. Leadership's just not one thing; it's a combination of many required things. In my experience, so I think it is important. And I guess I would ask if the formula isn't grit is a combination of passion and perseverance. Like, do you have a kind of different idea of what defines grit to be?
Yeah, for personal grit, I say it's the will to persevere to achieve long term goals. And there's some
Mhm.
psychological back and forth between Angela and some other folks that say that grit is nothing more than conscientiousness, which is one of the big five personality traits. And she counter argues that hey, it has this long term aspect of it that sometimes conscientiousness doesn't, which I tend to agree with. You a gritty goal or something like that is something that is takes some time and effort to get to. It's not just this thing that you wake up today and all of a sudden you're great at. For organizational grit, I say it's the group's will to persevere to achieve long term goals. And there's some components of each. And talk a little bit about personal grit. I think there's 6 aspects of it that help folks achieve that. And the first is figuring out your purpose. Everybody talks about, hey, you got to understand your purpose or your why. Then you've got to develop a goal. And I throw some ideas out there on how to do a better job on goal setting, because I think folks do a pretty good job of setting goals, but then they don't have that follow through on how to actually accomplish those goals. And I talk about that for a while. Perseverance, of course, that idea of how do you put one foot in front of the other? How do you build this momentum? You've seen it right now as you're standing up your new business. In the rearview mirror, I'm sure standing up the first business was a lot easier. And now as you're putting that foot in front of each other, it takes a little bit more effort. You've got to have some resilience, because you got to be able to bounce back when the inevitable obstacle happens. Some courage, and I love talking about courage, and maybe we can get into that today. This idea of how do you deal with your fears? Because if you're really going for this
Yeah.
gritty goal, there's some fear there. And I didn't realize it until I became a small business owner on how much fear there is in being a small business owner. And then finally, you got to figure out what your motivation is, where it's coming from. Is it intrinsic? Is it extrinsic? How are you getting that energy? Any of those things are really fun to talk about. But I think those 6 things combined to create grit and create this idea of how do you get to your long term goals.
So run them back for me. So I had perseverance, courage, resilience, motivation. What were the other two?
Purpose, goal, perseverance, resilience, courage, and motivation.
Purpose and goal.
Purpose and goal.
Purpose, goal, perseverance, courage, resilience, and motive. Yep. So yeah, no, I agree, man, and I'm glad you brought up the part about courage because I think it was one of your blog posts. You were talking about the fear of when your first jump is training as a young paratrooper and things like that. I thought it was a really good article. So I definitely want to jump into courage with you. With regard to a grit, though, before we jump off this, like, I mean, how do you feel? Is it something that we can grow? Obviously, you're writing a book, growing your grit, but is it? I guess what's the difference? Makes some people have it and other people don't.
Yeah. Um, so I think it can be grown and developed. I'm a hardcore believer that you can develop it, and I think everybody has a little bit of it. I do think one of the things that's helpful is if you have grit in one area, it corresponds and transfers to other areas. For instance, your Marine Corps background and played a role in you standing up the company because you had that grit, you persevered, you overcame, you accomplished some long-term goals in the Marines, which then set you up for success. And maybe, and I can't remember your background if you played high school sports or stuff like that, but there are things like that that helped you as well before you got in the Marine Corps to develop that grit. There's some folks that may not have a whole lot of it, but I think if they sit down and spend a little bit of time trying to create this framework and understand their purpose and set a goal, and then work through the other four, they have the ability to develop some grit and make some progress towards that long-term goal.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to paraphrase that back to you, right? So, those folks who have the grit like have some accomplishments behind them. They've gone through and they can look back and go, "Well, I did that. So why can't I do this?" type of mindset. So I think that was great. And if they don't have those things, I'm hearing you say, get out there and challenge yourself. Like go out and push yourself through maybe some hard things that will help you kind of build that resilience, that Rolodex to look back at and go, yeah, I did that. I ran that half marathon. Whatever. I mean, if you're not a runner and you get it, like you see it, I know you're into endurance sports. Like you see it and you hear about these people like running their first 5K and they're so proud, because to them that is a big accomplishment because they aren't really runners or weren't before they signed up or whatever the case is.
Right, right. Yeah. This idea of finding, a stretch goal or getting yourself into the discomfort zone, that's where we learn and grow, right? You get into this discomfort zone, you may fail. I went up and did a bike race up in North Georgia. It was 103 miles and about almost 11,000 feet of climbing. And there was a eventual point where I actually had to pull into a gas station. I never had to do this in a race and go in and get some water and a Coke and then sit in the chair outside the gas station for about 5 minutes and sort of regather myself because it had just taken that much. I had one more climb to go. There were 6 climbs out of it. I had one more climb to go. And man, it had just taken that much out of me. And I just needed to sit there and sort of, contemplate life, contemplate, hey, why the heck am I riding the bike doing this? But with a little bit of water and a Coke, I was like, okay, I can get to the next rest stop. I'll get there. I'll see what they've got and get some food in me and then try to finish this thing. But without having some of the background of, hey, I've accomplished gritty goals. I've done 100-mile races before. That certainly helped. But there was a point where I was like, man, do I need to throw in the towel right now? Because this thing has kicked my butt.
That's the wall, right? And we have in these
Right.
different races, like you hit that wall. Is it? So I know running, like marathons, we always talked about like the wall. Is it the same thing in bikes, or do you guys call it something different? Or
Well, so bikes actually call it bonking, where you haven't managed your food
balking?
and your water, and all of a sudden you just lose all you know drive basically. Um, I actually, if you're an endurance runner, you know when you're going to hit the wall. For me, I know it's starting to come on when I start to lose that mental. edge or that competitiveness. It isn't a physical thing, but when I start losing that desire of, hey, I'm going to try to catch that guy in front of me, or I need to go a little bit harder up this hill, I'm like, oh, I need to eat. And uh,
Yeah.
this race was just, it was a lot of climbing early on. And there just wasn't you'd spend all this energy climbing these mountains in North Georgia, and then you'd immediately get to the top and you drop into a 40 or 50 mile an hour descent. And there was no time to take your hands off the handlebars and get a gel or do anything else like that. And, I was stupid. I should have stopped. Looking back on it, you're like, oh, I should have stopped at the rest stop. I should have eaten something. I should have been a little bit more deliberate, and it would have resulted in a little bit better results than what actually happened.
Yeah, and you learn from that, and probably the next time you're going to gear up properly, and that's a part of it because now you are getting smarter, right? It might have been a failure of sorts or a first time, this happening to you or whatever, but now and like that will probably never happen to you again, at least on that race because you're and even maybe planning for future races. I learned that too on my first marathon. I think it was mile 21, and I ran the Marine Corps marathon 5 times, but the first time I hit mile 21. I think we are coming out of Crystal City, and I was hitting the wall about mile 21. And man, what a terrible time to hit the wall because I came up on like Arlington National Cemetery. So I think to your point, I think you're getting to like the psychology of it. Like you're mentally just drained. And here I was like hitting the wall and literally starting to walk. It did good up until I hit the wall and I truly like felt like I couldn't run anymore. And it was same thing, lack of nourishment. Like I thought I could run 26 straight miles and like not have goose and, all these things aside from what they hand out periodically. But man, I remember hitting the wall and Arlington National Cemetery was there to my left and the Pentagon was on the right, I believe. And I was just like halfway bawling, like, to myself, like, what am I doing here? Look at this cemetery. And just like, it was this huge mental, emotional, like moment and then finally I had to go, this is why I'm here, get going, and just kind of just start trying to get that momentum back up. But I learned like my next races, like I had like a little crew that met me that we planned, like I had different mile markers. I carried a camelback and I had bananas in it. So it was something that I just learned that, hey, if I guess to your point, right? If I got through this with none of this, the supplies and resources, how well can I do with what I know now? And that's, got me going. So,
Yeah, no, incredibly beautiful race. I
yeah,
lived in
it's,
DC for three years there at the Pentagon, and you know, great point about it's the psychological and mental side that where we build that sort of resiliency, that idea of, hey, how do we overcome these challenges and get better at it? But you don't get there if you're not taking a risk and putting it out there, and having a little bit of courage to do something beyond what is sort of your normal day to day.
yeah. And I feel like it's in my latter years too, like even like working out, I'm like I'm recognizing like I'm hitting that point of failure and now I'm like intentionally trying to see how far I can go past this, right? Because that's really what is constituting our growth, right? And we're hitting that hitting that bar of where we've come and deciding because you can hit your max whatever and say, yeah, I only usually do about 20 and that's it, and you can tap out right there, or you can go, let's see how far you can go and keep pushing that bar. And then again, back to your point, like now, next time you come in, well, I used to be able to do 20, but last time I did 22. Let's see if, you just kind of keep building on top of it, knowing, you've been there before.
Yeah. So, in a personal milestone, I turned 50 this year. And one of my blog posts, I actually wrote about how do you be a good athlete after 50. And there's a guy, Friel, who wrote a book, Fast After 50. And one of the problems for us 40 to 50-year-old athletes is we get in a rut and we go out and we run the same 5K route every day, or I ride the same 25-mile route, and you don't push yourself. And the most important thing for older athletes to slow the atrophy, we all are losing muscle mass, and all, if you're older than 29 or so, we're losing muscle mass and we're losing speed and all that. And so how do you slow that atrophy down? And it's through the gym and weightlifting, and it's through tough workouts that push your boundaries, whether it's, sprints or repeats or stuff like that, that you're really right up at the edge of your max performance. That's how you move the bar and keep yourself being as fast as somebody who's 25 and got still on the uptick.
Yeah, I mean, talk to me about your thoughts about the comfort zone today. I mean, with regard to how easy it is to kind of fall into that rut, be comfortable, like where are you at on that whole social dilemma?
So I think most folks that know me, I'm definitely not sitting in the comfort zone. I'm always looking for a new challenge, and I'm okay with actually. One of the things that I'm a little bit differently wired than a lot of folks is I'm okay with risking it and not being successful. And somehow I sort of dust myself off and I get back after it. And hey, it's a learning experience. And so that to me is one of the more important things that I talk about in the resiliency chapter is, hey, you got to reframe things as, it's a success, and you should accomplish. It should be, if you complete whatever the task is and you get out of your comfort zone, it's a success. But if it's not helping, one of the big things is to reframe it as a learning opportunity. And hey, what did I learn from this? So if I had thrown in the towel in that race, it was definitely a learning opportunity. And I said, okay, I need to do a better job with nutrition. I need to stop at the rest stops. Those couple of things will set me up for success in a future race or a future kind of endeavor where I'm trying to ride 100 miles and climb 10,000 feet. Um, I, I do think,
Right.
it's easy to be comfortable. It's easy to get in a rut, and I am a creature of habit. I get up every day at the same time, walk the dog, and there is an ability to fall into that rut and be comfortable. Um, but for whatever reason, I still look for those opportunities to push myself and try to keep moving forward and trying to make things better, get better 1% every day.
Yeah, I mean, and as you see it, like what's the consequence of not building your grit? What happens to the leaders or folks that are just not challenging themselves?
Well, you see those folks that stall out career wise, or stall out. There's the popular term, the Peter principle. You sort of rise to your level of incompetence. You see that with folks that lose their drive, get comfortable, aren't trying to learn every day and grow and develop. That's been the phenomenal thing about standing up my own business in my 40s. It's pushed me to learn new things. I had to learn how to design my own website. I'd never been on a podcast before. I didn't have sort of an idea of what I should do if I'm on a podcast. I'd never written a book before. I'm not the greatest at sales. I will freely admit it, but I've taken classes on it. I've tried to get myself better at it. I've read books on it. I try to get better and learn the techniques and try to do things because I'm sure when you came out of I know you had the side hustle going when you were in the Marines, but when I came out of the Army, I had never made a sale. And how do you do that? And it's one of those things that you got to teach yourself and keep growing. And I don't know about you, but I like to be around people that are continually sort of growing and learning new things and trying, to push themselves a little bit. Falling into that rut and being complacent um,
Yeah.
works for some folks, and there are points in time in my life where I've had to sort of take a step back and do that. But uh, I like this idea of always trying to figure out new things and get better at things.
I mean, you have to. I mean, I think it's to your point. Like another way to say it is like if you're not growing, you're dying, right? Like in like you said, you hit that prime at 28, 29, and if you, I think when you look at folks and they're hitting their 40s and 50s, and it's like, hey, well, I'm 40 now, I don't need to be doing all that stuff. Like that's a decision. Like that's not a fact. That's a decision. Like you're using that age, that number as the low hanging fruit excuse to not put in the work anymore, right? Like
Yeah.
it's we've got plenty of examples to see, like yourself included. You're in 50s. You're and I've met many, especially in the last year, because I would agree. Like we're we're going against the tide with this comfort zone thing. Like it's so easy to just satisfy yourself these days with technology and creature comforts and whatever. Like everything's so accessible. It's so easy to be in that rut. So it's, we're outnumbered with regard to kind of trying to push yourself into your point, like being around people who are of that mindset, because it's just so easy not to. I mean, it's so easy not to. But man, I like at 40, what the hell am I now? I'm 41. I'm in the best shape of my life, period, to include like when I was in the Marines, whatever. And that's just as a result of a constant, consistent pace of learning, pushing myself, maintaining routines and stuff. Period. People have listened before, heard me say, man, I would whip the shit out of 17, 23-year-old me. I would beat his ass right now. Like there'd be no comp, because you just wouldn't have, what I have physically, mentally, right now. And I'm not done with that. I'm not going like, oh, I'm 41. I've got it all figured out. Like I know I have to keep that going, or I know what's going to happen. I think some people just decide that's what's supposed to happen, but it doesn't really need to be the case.
Yeah. Well, it's the quote from I think it's the Shawshank Redemption, where it's, you got to get busy living or get busy dying. And, I'm a big proponent of get busy living, and hey, you keep moving the bar
Yeah.
forward. I agree. Middle-aged athletes and middle-aged executives have an advantage. The younger folks, have the advantage of years and time to learn things and the opportunity to get more reps in. But there are ways that us as middle-aged, both leaders and athletes, can take advantage of some of the opportunities that we have to quickly get those reps in and get to a level that's at the same or better than younger folks. And some of those is, you hire a coach. That's a great way. You can you know you can break it down into smaller portions and get in lots of reps in wherever you figure out the most important pieces. For you, it might be doing squats in the gym, might be the thing that you really need to do a lot of. And that sets you up better physically than, the younger athlete that might be in there doing a lot of curls because, they really want their biceps to look big. And you figured out that doesn't really do anything for me. And I can just focus in on the squats because that's going to be the maximum return kind of thing.
Oh man, I went and did a speech to some kids at a high school a few months back, and the football team. And I remember I gave the deal. It was like a 45-minute stint. And one of the kids comes up to me after. He's like, how much can you bench? I'm like, man, I so haven't been asked that question or even thought about the answer since I was 17, like you in high school, like,
So,
and that was
so
the truth. I was like,
yeah.
it doesn't matter,
So I didn't get into squatting and deadlifting until uh, early 40s. And I look back so I played high school football, and we would go to the gym, but we focused on the LG muscle groups, which was the looking good muscle groups. And so we were doing bench and buys and neck and a few other things. I'm like, I just wish I had known about squats and deadlifts as a high school athlete, because I think I would have been so much better. But
Yeah.
I hope the football
Well,
team there
even being
is doing squats.
smarter. Yeah, even being smarter about like your whole physical fitness system, right? Because it's not just cardio or not just how much you can bench. It's a combination of your anaerobic systems and your aerobic system, and and knowing that, hey, it's not just about getting on that bench or getting on the squat rack. Yeah, you need to do that because that's a part of your anaerobic system, but you also have to push your VO2 max, so do some high intensity work, sprint work, whatever, as well as your endurance work to get some of your aerobic systems up. So it's you actually, and I actually was. That I learned, and I today kind of focus my workouts around that and focus on all of those systems and get a good, well-rounded routine. I would say the one thing I've learned is just I just don't recover the way I used to. Right? I mean, I just
Yeah.
don't bounce back. Yeah, I can't. I got to be conscious of that.
Yeah. I can't string together two hard workouts back to, uh, you know, Thursday and Friday. I can't do it back to back days. But on the same side, I'm willing to bet that you eat cleaner now than you did versus 17-year-old Dale, and you get better
Mm-hmm.
sleep than 17-year-old Dale. And those two things, I think, also, as we get older, we figure some of these things out and put in systems that help us, get that recovery that we need, eat better, fuel ourselves better. That gives us an advantage over. I eat more protein now than I probably ever have, but I realized that. I was reading a lot of when I got into squats and deadlifts. I was reading a lot of muscle magazines, and they're like, "Hey, you got to eat, gram of protein per, pound of body weight per day," and that's a ton of of protein. But the
Yeah.
the nice thing it has done for me, at least, and I've lost weight. I'm at a lower weight now than I was when I graduated college, and anytime that I was in the Army. And I've got energy. I'm getting good sleep, and I'm able to accomplish everything that I want. So I like your analogy about, hey, I could go back and beat 24-year-old Dales at any point in time right now.
Yeah. The No, and that's right. And I actually took the opportunity to explain that to the kids that day. I was like, look, you think bodybuilding is in the gym. Your body's actually building when you leave the gym. And that's why it comes into what you're eating. Like you're walking out of the gym and you're slamming a bag of Doritos and that's your meal for the day. And you're staying up until 2 a.m. and getting up at, a few hours later. Like, because and I wanted to kind of key in on their ambitions, right? Because as far as being those young teenage boys that they are, they're like you said. What'd you say? The looking good group,
The
like
looking
looking
good
good
muscle
muscle group.
groups.
Yeah, LGMs. So they're all focused on the LGM. So I wanted to play to that a little bit, and like, hey, like you guys want to get big? That's cool. You want to look good? That happens through your nutrition, that happens through your sleep, because that's when your body's building. Like you're in the gym, you're actually breaking your body down. You're doing these workouts, you're breaking your body down. And to me, the way I tell people about it today is like you're telling your body like what the standard requirements are so that your body can evolve to meet those standards, right? You're going in, you're throwing weights around, you're breaking your muscles down so that your brain in essence is telling your body like, hey, well, if this is what we're up against, we've got to get stronger. So we've got to grow. And it's grabbing those nutrients and building those muscles. But that's all happening how you're fueling yourself during sleep and all that stuff. So it's something I think I'm just realizing it the way it needs to be realized, to be honest. But that's the truth of it.
Yeah. Well, and the other amazing thing is how much our bodies can adapt to the workload that we put on it. You might increase your running by 10 miles a week, and it'll hurt for the first week or two, but then by week 3, you've settled into that new higher load, which I just, I guess as I've aged, I find that more amazing that you can put this load on it and all of a sudden your body will adapt to it, whether it's, doing 22 reps in the gym or whatever.
Yeah, and it's to a point that you made earlier, which is like you got to have the courage to go through it, right? Like there's this ego factor, this fear of the process that is in essence that wall in our mind, like that we don't want to go push farther because we know it's going to hurt. We don't, I think that's a big factor. I think your call on courage is an important one.
Yeah. Well, that idea that, we all have fears, and it manifests itself in different ways. It may be procrastination, you know, for whatever reason, you may have procrastinated on rolling out your podcast or whatever. But part of that was a fear because you were risking it. What if people don't listen? What if, I fail? What if what if nobody likes it? What if everybody gives me a 1-star review? Those kind of things are all holding us back, whether it's in the gym of, hey, I'm going to deadlift, 405 today. The opportunity, you might fail. You might sit there and pull as hard as you can and you can't get it up off the ground. But, um, that's okay. But if you do get it up, you got that thing to celebrate and say, hey, I set a new PR and things are going pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100%, and you just got to be willing. And I was saying, I wrote this down earlier when you were talking about the race and all that stuff. Like, you got to be just understand that you got to set a baseline. Like, even like the choice to challenge yourself and go do a run or a race or whatever. Don't get all caught up into the results of that first time, right? Like, get out there and just set your goal to finish. No matter what it takes to finish, and then take that and go, okay, I finished, check. What do I need to do? If I were to do this again, what would I do differently? What would my goal be? Right? Because that first race, you're really, in my opinion, just trying to establish a baseline. Or if you're even doing that a part of your training, go do like the distance, and so you have a baseline to start measuring yourself against.
And if you're older like us, you may be coming back to a sport that you did 20 years ago that you don't know what your current baseline is. And you have this mental image that, hey, when I was 25, I ran, X distance at X speed, and you go back and like, hey, I got to reestablish that baseline now because I'm 20 years older and in a different spot and all that. My big lesson learned out of the bike race was I didn't put in enough. I did some longer rides, but I didn't do enough of the 70 to 80-mile training rides that would have put enough load on me and enough time out on the bike that I wouldn't have had that crisis in confidence there towards the end.
The crisis of confidence. Yeah, the now I did the same thing. I ran the Baltimore Marathon one year. I was actually aiming to PR the DC Marathon, the Marine Corps Marathon, and my wife was pregnant. She was going to run the DC Marathon as well, but she decided not to do it because she got pregnant. So she had a bib, and one of my buddies was running too, and I said, "Hey, I got a bib. If you want to go run, you'll be Jody for the day if you want to run the Marine Corps Marathon." He goes, "I'll do it, but I'm already scheduled for the Baltimore Marathon. You've got to run that too." I'm like, shit. So that was 2 weeks before, and I was like, "Fine, I'll do it." But I had been training to do cause it was like my fourth maybe Marine Corps or something, and I wanted to just meet the standard to run Boston, because I'm sure like
Yeah.
Boston, you got to have a certain age group and time. So I was really like for 16 weeks, like really repping in to PR the Marine Corps Marathon, and for around a 3 hour mark. So I think I had to be like 3:15 or something like that. So, but I said, hey, sure, I'll run the Baltimore Marathon. Why not? And so I get out there. It's 2 weeks before the Marine Corps Marathon. It just first half ran an hour and 30. Like, I was smoking. I was like, I remember coming around at the halfway point, looking up at the big red digital sign or whatever, and it said hour and 30 minutes. I was like, yeah, I was feeling good. The whole back half of the race was nothing but hills. And I never looked at the race chart, the elevation, or nothing. And I do not live where there are hills. So I had not trained hills, nada. In the Marine Corps Marathon, the reason a lot of people choose that race to qualify for Boston is because it's a relatively flat
Yeah.
run.
Super flat.
Man, Baltimore was not flat. And I ran an hour and a half for the first half. I ran a 2:40 for the second half. I got just
Wow.
annihilated because I just was completely unprepared. I was not, and just couldn't do it. And my body couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Like, it kicked my ass. I mean, it really did. It was ugly, and so I went from like training to put on my best marathon show, proved it on the flat first half of the Baltimore, completely wrecked myself. I was still wrecked for the Marine Corps Marathon 2 weeks later. I did not meet my goal. And it was all just like trying to do too much, not, getting getting my head up, looking ahead. It was a good lesson in like, don't just say yes to everything. Think you're,
Right.
all
Right.
bad. You could do these
Now,
things. But
now, did you ever make the Boston qualifying time?
I did not. After that, once the kids started coming, and it looked to run marathons, do these races, it is a big demand on time. Yeah, I think I ran one more just for fun, no pressure, to get the 5, but it takes a lot of time,
Yeah.
to get those runs in. And the one thing that I had to decide, because my business was growing, when you're putting in those kinds of miles a week, like I'm drained during the day. I walk around, I'm pretty skinny as it is. So I'm not running around with a bunch of energy to burn, so to speak. And, getting those big runs in throughout a week, I'm pretty drained during the day. So I had to make a choice. Like I can't spend 4 months out of my year just burn out every day just from running. So I shelved it.
No,
Started doing
gr-
jujitsu after that.
great point about doing energy management, and how you've got to prioritize with goal setting. There's different points in our lives where um, you know the priority, at one point in time might be work, another point in time it might be setting the PR on the marathon or the bike ride, and another time it might be family. But I think that's, as we get ready to head into 2022, um, as folks do goal setting, it's a good thing in January to sit down and go, okay, out of the three big sort of parts of my life, which one is the priority for 2022? And let's have an honest discussion with our spouse or significant other and kids. Hey, this year I'm, all in on work, and the the workouts and family are going to take a little bit lower priority. Um,
Yeah.
uh, I think that's super important, to have that acknowledgement, because type A folks, like I think both of us are type A, tend to try to do it all, and then you fall short, like you did in Baltimore. You thought, hey, I can do it all. I can balance, new family and work and crushing it and getting to a Boston qualifying time. And we get a harsh lesson that you can't do it all. And
Yeah.
I see that now as an older person too. Hey, you can bring your A game, and bring that A game, but you don't get it in everything. And so you have to be
Yeah.
intentional and go, okay, where am I going to spend the energy and make this really, really important and really count?
Yeah, it is a good lesson to have, because I've had to learn that too. Like you can't. Yeah, it's the old Chinese proverb, right? Like he who chases two rabbits catches neither, right? Like you cannot effectively go really kill major goals with three major goals at the same time. Like you've got to focus and make your things that are in the foreground. You got to make that the foreground and only take on things that you can tolerate as background tasks, background things or whatever. But you rack up three major goals, right? You're setting up your quarter. Let's just say you're setting up your quarter, let alone your year, or maybe you are setting up your year. But you go, here's my three big goals for 2022, and you come out of the gate January 1 like hardcore on all three of those things, you're gonna get, we're just not capable of sustaining that. The better thing would probably be like, hey, here's my three goals for 2022. The first quarter, I'm going to get this one done. Lock, check the box. Then over the summer, I'm going to knock out two, and then that'll set me up nice to knock out the third one by the end of the year. Now you've efficiently taken care of those things. And it just can't be. And I think the other point to say about that, right, is that I'm talking about a bit of compartmentalization too, right? Because you can have a major work goal and a major fitness goal as long as you kind of keep them in their buckets of time. Like you can manage that, but you can't maybe have two major fitness goals at the same time. So
Another great discussion that I love having with the executive coaching clients is, okay, hey, we do some goal setting and say, okay, all right, so you've done your goal setting, you've got your goals. Let's look at the calendar and put time on the calendar for these to happen. And then the second thing that I need you to think about is what is going to come off, because you're at a full life right now. and you're adding these 2 to 3 goals. So what are you going to say? Hey, I don't have the bandwidth or the space or the energy to take on to continue trying to do this, and maybe a nonprofit that they were trying to do, or a board or something like that. Like, hey, you got to take something off so you can put the right amount of energy into this new goal. Because if you aren't, and just saying, hey, I'm going to work harder, um, you know you're going to hit that wall at some point in time, and you're not going to be doing well at any of the goals.
Yeah. And that gets psychologically frustrating, and it's affecting your will to persevere through the challenge of it and stuff like that. I mean, what do you see? Like, I loved your blog about coaching and why it's important. Like, and what are you seeing um, most amongst like your clients you're working with, that what people are struggling with that you're having to help them with?
Yeah, so I guess I'll take that question and go just slightly different. I think having a coach, and I like to do it every other week. Um, I think, especially for high performers, it's a good way to have that accountability tool where you've got to check in with your coach every 2 weeks and say, hey, these are the things that I laid out as my goals. This is where I see myself as the end state. But hey, I need somebody to hold me accountable every 2 weeks. I try to send out an agenda for our. I know you do it a little bit differently, but I have all my coaching clients on Fridays, and so on Mondays they get the agenda of what we're going to talk about. Of course, the agenda can change, and we can go whatever direction that with whatever is going on in their lives. But it provides them that gentle reminder that, hey, we're halfway through between our sessions. This is what you said you were going to do, and I'm going to ask you again on Friday how you got after that. And so that tool, that simple accountability tool, is powerful and really helps folks make strides towards accomplishing that goal. And that to me is where I've seen a ton of for the clients. They've been rewarded with it, and then I get some professional and personal satisfaction out of just seeing them make progress towards these tough goals. And because they're leaders in huge companies and big organizations, and trying to stand up their own companies and stuff like that, and it's just very rewarding to see them make progress towards these goals where maybe they were hitting the wall before and not getting there.
Yeah, not able to push themselves. Like, I think that's the power of coaching, right? You're really stepping in to help. Like, there's a reason like sports teams don't just, it's not just the players on the field running themselves. Like, someone's got to help pull it together, help push them to their potential. I think like what I like to say is, like, the hardest thing about self discipline is the self part, right? Like, having to lead yourself to a standard that you're setting is the challenge, because even if you're like, if unless you're talking to someone about it, it could be in secret that you're failing, right? You may be setting these goals for yourself, but you're not working with someone, you're not telling anyone. So there's not this necessity to maintain your word to a degree, right? Like,
Right.
you're not, it's hard to push yourself sometimes. It really is.
Yeah. Well, and having that accountability, your spouse or significant other is, to tell them the goal is a great way to have that accountability. If you don't have a coach, another great tool that I love is, taking the sticky note and putting it on your mirror. So every morning you're looking at whatever the goal is. I think another important thing that I've helped folks out with is cutting their goals down to a manageable number. Folks are busy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on, and like we said, yes, you can have these compartments where maybe you're maintaining the status quo on your athletics right now, but you've really got to hit these 2 goals in work right now in this quarter, and then you'll go back to trying to get to your sports goals, your health and nutrition, because I think those are important as well to get to the high performance levels.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's awesome. So in your career, like, what's some major challenges? What was like your biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
Uh, You talking Army or now?
Either or.
Okay.
What's kind of like
Okay.
one of the biggest challenges that you've had to face?
I will say, frankly, the biggest challenge was standing up my own company 18 months ago. You know, until you do that and take that, you know, we talked about pushing ourselves and pushing into the discomfort zone. Man, that was a huge step into the discomfort zone. Um, you know, I had been in, I'd been in the Army and then had gone to work for this other company and was used to having a regular paycheck. And when you stand up your own business, you don't have a regular paycheck. And if you don't make sales, there aren't customers coming in the front door. You're not getting paid. And I went almost 2 months without a client uh, last summer during the middle of the pandemic. I did not understand the stress and fear that small business owners have, especially as they're starting out, because you don't know if what you're selling is going to resonate with the market. You think it will, you have this idea, but it may not. And so, to me, you saw the blog post on jumping out of a plane. I, I actually found standing up a company more scary than jumping out of a plane, because the jumping out of a plane in the military, you have all these rituals and systems and stuff in place. When you start out your own company, you're just out there, and there's no framework, there's no nothing. You don't know which shiny ball to chase. You don't know which one to not pay attention to. I'm sure you're getting a million. Hey, I can help your business grow to $10,000 a week. Kind of emails from different people, and you're just like, oh
Yeah.
man, there's just so much noise out here. I don't know which way to go and where to take this. It To me, standing up the company has been the uh, the scariest thing I've done. Biggest challenge.
And what how have you been able to overcome that? What have you learned, coming
Yeah.
through that?
Well, for those folks that are standing up their own business, so for a couple ideas. First off, for the military folks, I would say, hey, if you're interested in standing up your own business, I know you sort of walked into yours, but for most folks, I would encourage them to take a year in another company just to see how corporate America does things. I couldn't have set up my company without having worked for that other company for a while and figured out what I liked and didn't like out of that other company. The second thing is I manage my risk by actually setting some boundaries. And for me, what I did was I said, hey, I'm going to try this for a year. So March of 2020 to March of 2021, and I'll take an assessment in 21 and see where I'm at. And if I'm satisfied that this has got legs, I'll keep doing it. And if it doesn't, I tried, I learned, I made, I developed some skills in myself, and I'll be okay with that, and I'll go try something else at that point in time. So I got to March of 2021. I developed some clients. I was doing some consulting and doing some executive coaching. I'm like, hey, I'm going to try this for another year. And so once again, I've bounded it and said, okay, I'll try it till 22 and take the assessment and see if the company's growing and going in the right direction that I want it to. I set goals for the company, and I've got them right here next to me on the wall. And as I make an assessment here at the end of the year, I know I didn't achieve all of them, but I put some goals out there and tried to take the company in that direction.
The and was it that broad? And maybe you just answered this, but was the March 2021 deadline, was it that broad? Like, hey, I'm going to see if I like it, like where this is going by then, or did you have some specific goals even for that first year that were
So,
tangible?
I had an idea of what you know, I had an idea of what sort of income I needed to generate out of the company to say, hey, this is a viable kind of thing. Um, and so that was a benchmark. I knew I wasn't gonna have the overnight wonder. It wasn't going to be $1 million a year company on the first year. But I had an idea of, hey, I wanted it to reach a certain level, and um, it made it just barely. And but then you're like, okay, now I'm going to double that next year, and I'll double it the year after, and I'll double it the year after. I don't know if that's how your first company went, but at least for me, that helped me a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome, and I think I like how you're just bringing awareness to like those boundaries. Like I think like I think you're 100% spot on to setting forth a vision. Some people just start running and they don't really have a vision of where they're running, but you had a vision of, hey, this is where I'm trying to go, and also had a vision on kind of to your borders of like what you expected it to look like to be in order to keep going. And I think that's really important to have that clarity. I think it probably serves you well to kind of you built some necessity like, hey, I got to get it to here, and probably with your gritty mindset, like not wanting to not be successful in it, so you had that bar that you had to meet. It probably served you not just your goals, but the minimum.
Yeah. Now, there was a bit. I don't want to give your listeners a wrong idea. There was a bit of running around. I started blogging.
Yeah.
I had never blogged before. I'm still blogging twice a week. Sometimes I wonder if that's the right amount. Is that too much? Too little? Um, I've contemplated going down to 1 day a week and maybe some longer articles. But when I got ready, I was going to pull the trigger at blog post number 150 and go down to once a week. And all of a sudden, I had a whole bunch of stuff I wanted to say. And then I was like, oh, well, I'll keep going. I'll keep going at 2 times a week. But, I'm not sure. You try to figure out, hey, how is that making an impact? Is it resonating? Is it, providing folks something of value, and something that's useful? And I'm sure it's the same with you. You get texts or emails from different folks you've had on the podcast. Those sort of notes back. You don't realize that somebody's reading your stuff and like, hey, I really liked blog post number 157. I was like, I didn't even know you were paying attention. But that to me is where I get
Yeah.
the return on that kind of investment. And I've had to pivot some too. I thought I would start getting calls to do talks, and those haven't come uh, as much as I thought they were going to come. And so instead, I've moved to executive coaching, which we talked about before the show started, was just sort of a chance encounter. Same way that the book was just sort of a chance encounter with talking to somebody and said, "Hey, yeah, I think you've got some grit, and why don't you take a look at this guy's stuff?" And I was like, "Huh, I don't think he's got a process, so maybe I can help some folks and help them accomplish their goals."
Yeah, no, I mean it's awesome. I mean, and I think, like I said, the reviews I saw in the book were great. And I mean, what are you working on now? What are you excited about now? What are you working on?
Um, Actually, one of the so in the be open to opportunities kind of thing for folks. Had a West Point classmate contact me and said, "Hey, I really like your grit stuff. We're doing some stuff with an app for soccer players, and we'd really like you to come in and help us build an assessment tool that looks at some of the psychological aspects of good soccer players." And we'd like to add that. They're doing a bunch of stuff on the data side with soccer players. Um, and so I've dug into building assessments, and we'll put something together that probably goes live in January or February uh, for this friend that was just like, hey, this is kind of interesting, and I've dug into the big five, the questions that are asked in the big five indicators and the grit surveys and stuff like that. Like, hey, there's something here that might be able to figure out which soccer players in development have a chance to go further than others. And so I'm excited about it. And it just was an opportunity that kind of happened because I'd been talking about grit, I've been blogging and put the book out. And so be open to opportunities that that may come your way.
Yeah, yeah, you got to keep your head up. I think that's awesome. Like to see, because like you said earlier, I think like you don't necessarily know what the market's demanding. Like you've got an idea that you think they want, but once you kind of get out there, it'll tell you what it wants, and
Right.
you kind of got to be agile, and you got to kind of maybe again back to checking your ego a little bit. Go, hey, I know I wanted to go here, but I keep getting asked for this, and seems like this is going to pay the bill. So you kind of start to kind of reflect and adjust a little bit.
Yeah. Like I played around like Printful. I don't know if there's it's an amazing time to start a business because there's so many different tools out there that you can stand up a business with just about anything. And so
Yeah.
Printful is an on-demand printing company. I paid a guy through Fiverr to design some grit logos, and I started doing for a little while on my website. I had T-shirts and hats that said grit. Um, and But one of the barriers to entry for me, at least, was sales tax. And selling them off my own website, I didn't want to have to deal with sales tax and multiple, the jurisdictions. Amazon handles it for me on the book sales, so I don't have to worry about that. But and there's a company out there called TaxJar that will do it for you, but they want $99 a month to handle your sales tax. And I wasn't sure I was going to make, I wasn't sure I was selling $99, even $99 worth of merchandise a month off the website. So I tried it for a little while. I bought one of my own T-shirts and then I shelved it just because I didn't want to deal with that side of it. But I don't know how you're doing it, but just some neat things where you try you test the market and you say, huh, okay, I'll try that and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes back to just taking risk, but like taking risks with an intention, a bit of a hypothesis. Like, hey, I want to do this because, and know what your intentions are and what you hope to get out of it. But again, having that boundary that if it's not, but this is what I expect, and if it's not directionally accurate or towards this or looking like it's going to get there, you got to go back and weigh it against your goals and priorities.
Yeah.
The With regard to the book, it coming up on time, David. What ways can people find the book? Reach out to you. What's your preferred access?
Yeah, so the book's up on Amazon. You can buy it for your Kindle in softcover or hardcover. If you do want a signed copy, just send me an email. Go to my website at www.thefivecoatconsultinggroup.com, and my email's all over it. Shoot me an email, and I can send you a signed copy. We'll work through that. Um, Love folks to check out the website, check out the blog. The blog is there on the website, but I also cross posted on LinkedIn, so folks can find me on LinkedIn. I'm David Fivecoat on LinkedIn, and would love to talk to them about anything, either bike riding, crisis and confidence, growing their grit, or anything. Love to talk to your listeners.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like I say, the blog's awesome. Like my favorites when you guys get out there and look for it. The one about the value of coaching, especially if you're an executive and you kind of bearing that burden. I think you did a really great piece on that. Great piece on courage. You're singing, talking my language on that one. So I love your stuff, and looking forward to seeing what else you put out there, man.
Thanks, Dale. Thanks for having me today. Really enjoyed this.
Yep. Thanks for being on.